Hello again, Evolution in America class. It's July the 21st as I record this, a very important anniversary date in the Scopes trial in 1925. This was the date when a verdict was rendered. And on July 20th, 1925 was the big showdown in the court proceedings between Clarence Darrow and William Jennings Bryan. And so I thought I would begin by taking a glance back 2 years ago, in 2018, when this course was last offered. We had a field trip. Obviously, the pandemic has made a repeat of that not possible this time. 2022 maybe. But I thought maybe I could show you a few images of our field trip on my tablet here, if it doesn't glare too much, right? That was the scene. An old car was parked outside the courthouse on July the 21st, 2018, when we got there. It was about a 2.5-hour drive down from Nashville. And beautiful drive if you've never made it. Don't take the interstate, go the back roads via McMinnville. And what we found was that the atmosphere in Dayton on the 21st of July 2018 was indeed festive, but it wasn't quite the madcap festival from 1925 with no live monkeys when we were there, or fire and brimstone evangelists and other so-called cranks and freaks. But there were other interesting things going on. There's some images from 1925. As Mitch was showing us, the cartoonists had a field day with the Scopes trial. Doesn't look that different today, actually. It's not quite in black and white, but that historical marker, familiar to Tennesseans, that style of commemoration, it's right out there in front of the courthouse. And there's one of the Malice students, our friend Don. And they just not too long ago, they finally got around to putting up a statue of Clarence Darrow to go with the statue of William Jennings Bryan that's been there for a long, long time. These slides are all posted to our blog site if you want to take time to read all the words or even a few of the words. A lot of words there. I had fun posing in front of the Read Your Bible banner outside on the courthouse that Darrow insisted, and the judge surprisingly agreed be taken down before they proceeded on the 20th in 1925. Right. And so you can see lots here to look at. There we are. Some of us waiting for the show to begin inside the courthouse on those old wooden pews. The same ones, I'm told, that were there in 1925. Similarly packed, but this time they had air conditioning, which was a big improvement. And then there's the museum, the museum down in the basement that has all kinds of interesting artifacts. Go before or after or both. The next time, if we have the opportunity, maybe next summer, even though it's not a summer for the course, but I might go anyway. And if any of you are around and interested, let me know. Maybe we'll make a field trip of it in 2021. Some scenes from the show. Other things. There's one of those is my roll top. I have a thing about roll tops. But the other one was Darrow's. Or actually, it was the one that was in the courthouse. I'm thinking about Darrow's roll top because I just watched that made-for-TV movie from 1974 starring Henry Fonda as Clarence Darrow, where he had a roll top. Not as nice as mine, I have to say. But anyway, lots more slides here. We won't take any more time right now, but I wanted you to be aware of them and teach you it. But there's my first landlord, Winterton C. Curtis, one of the 7 scientists. He's a zoologist, was a zoologist from the University of Missouri. one of the 7 scientists in Dayton who were not allowed to testify by Judge Ralston. And there's stuff about him in the basement museum as well. And there he is at Mizzou back in the day. And a historical notice about his home where I lived. The banister was constructed from wood salvaged from the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. But that's not what we're here to talk about right now. There's a famous photo of Bryan and Darrow and Bryan. And, yeah, we went to the Monkey Town pub when it was all over. But all right, enough of that. Well worth the trip, though, if you ever get the chance. Go to Dayton. And so it was on July 20, 1925, that Darrow surprised everyone by calling Bryan to the stand. He said, if I can't have my scientific witnesses, I'll have an expert on the Bible. So Bryan took the stand, and by most accounts was fairly humiliated by Darrow's questioning. Although there's some dispute about that. We'll talk about that in a second. Inherit the Wind does fictionalize elements of the Darrow-Bryan exchange, but it pretty closely captures the spirit of the exchange, epitomized for me in Bryan's exasperated, I do not think about things I don't think about, after several peppering questions from Darrow. The actual court transcript, I'm not going to read the whole thing, there's a lot here, but this is the actual transcript, not the script from Inherit the Wind that I've posted on our site. And to just note a few quick highlights. Before they really got going, Darrow objected to that read your Bible sign, that banner, and said, well, what if we put up a read your evolution banner? The judge didn't want to do that, so they took the sign down. And, well, let's see, at one point, I thought it was striking when Bryan says, when asked about Jonah and the whale or Jonah and the big fish, do you believe that that really happened? Is that to be taken literally? Bryan said, yes, sir. One miracle is just as easy to believe as another. And Darrow says, just as hard. And they go around about that for a bit. And then there was an interjection from Tom Stewart, and then Darrow eventually asks one of the prominent questions that's often recurred to when we discuss this exchange. What would have happened? Do you ever wonder? Have you ever pondered what would have happened to the earth if it had been made to stand still? No. You have not? No. The God I believe in could have taken care of that, Mr. Darrow. And this was really the tenor of most of his responses. Miraculous event that can't be accounted for in naturalistic terms. Bryan says, no problem, the God I believe in can do whatever he wants. But the net effect of it, I think, on most observers was to make very clear that Bryan was a scientific illiterate. A man who's very worldly in other respects, but knew really nothing about science. And worse than that, didn't want to. A sort of shocking degree of incuriosity, a lack of curiosity. And I do not think about things I don't think about, which makes it easy to not think about things that challenge your own beliefs, doesn't it, for anyone? And we're all guilty of that to an extent, I would argue. You know, we have bubbles of insulation around our most treasured beliefs, and we don't think about what it looks like to others outside our bubbles. And another point, Bryan says to Darrow, you're the first man I ever heard of who's been interested in the question of the age of the earth, or whether there were people on the earth more than 5,000, 6,000 years ago. All right. And then they get around to Bishop Ussher's calculation of the exact moment of creation, about 6,000 years ago. And he stands by that, but then he really loosens the bombshell of acknowledging that maybe a day is not 24 hours, maybe it could be whatever. It could be millions of years. It could be perfectly compatible with the evolutionary account of the origin of species. And apparently the people in the gallery were quite shocked that Bryan would make that concession. I do not think it necessarily means a 24-hour day. He says, it would be just as easy for the kind of God we believe in to make the earth in 6 days as in 6 years, or in 6 million or 600 million years. I do not think it's important. Well, it is pretty important if you want to get clear on what really happened. And we come to the end of that day's proceedings. Bryan says, Your Honor, I can shorten this testimony. The only purpose Mr. Darrow has is to slur at the Bible, but I will answer his question, etc. Darrow says, I object to your statement. I am exempting, did he say exempting or examining, but whatever, on your fool ideas that no intelligent Christian on earth believes. And with that, the judge banged the gavel. The court is adjourned until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, which was, of course, the day of sentencing. So, the question, was Bryan, in fact, humiliated on the stand? One of us thinks not, has said that she thinks not, implicitly wondering if the populist appeal of the great commoner wasn't itself a recommendation for his views, and asking, where is that fine line when it is appropriate to go with the majority? Who decides when the majority is wrong? Well, my response would be that in a free society, our goal is to educate the people so that each is equipped and empowered to decide, so that we trust that each will be equipped and empowered to decide whether the majority view is right. It can never be right to go with the majority simply because it's the majority or because people who look and think like you believe that way. Right? That's the abandonment of your, some would say, God-given right to think for yourself. Immanuel Kant, the German Enlightenment philosopher, said, sapere aude, have the courage to use your own understanding, to use your reason, to effectively think for yourself. Thoreau, Henry David Thoreau, expressed the ideal, the democratic ideal, which, of course, as an ideal, the civil code cannot support in actual practice, but it may still be the right way to think about it in principle. He said, any man more right than his neighbors constitutes a majority of one already. I do think Bryan humiliated himself on the stand in response to Darrow's questioning as a progressive of great native intelligence who showed himself a scientific illiterate. To me, it's the old two cultures problem that C.P. Snow talked about, where you've got the literary culture and the scientific culture, and never the twain shall meet. The literary intellectuals know nothing of science, and scientists know nothing of literature, and that's really unfortunate. And it's worse now than it ever was, certainly when C.P. Snow introduced the idea decades ago. The two cultures. We need to find ways to bridge the culture. We need to educate citizens in a democracy to be at least minimally not scientifically illiterate, to have some understanding of science. And I would say to be broadly culturally literate and for everyone to have an understanding of comparative religion. But the point is that we don't want a society in which you only know what you and people like you think and believe, and you dismiss everybody else, or you ignore everybody else, or you create a second-class society for everybody else. Right? We cannot, of course, be Renaissance people. I suppose once, maybe during the Renaissance, it was possible to be a Renaissance man or woman and try to know everything knowable. That's no longer possible. But neither can we afford the luxury of knowing nothing about science or of denying the import of things we don't fully understand. Bryan's ignorance of and utter absence of curiosity about the natural world, as exhibited on the witness stand in Dayton, was shocking. Were shocking. It was a sad end for a figure whose heart for human suffering over a long and distinguished public career was generally in the right place. but his science denial made him ridiculous. And speaking of science denial, I have a post, Homo credulum. I don't know if my Latin is quite up to snuff here, but Homo sapiens, the wise species, are we the wise animal, or are we the credulous one, Homo credulum? Both, I think, is probably the right answer. Part of the troubling fallout of science denialism, of the sort that we saw in Dayton, of the sort that we see lately with regard to the pandemic and other things, environmental science, about global climate change. Part of the troubling fallout of all that is extreme credulity with respect to all kinds of crazy ideas, as Cousin John Oliver discusses. He's not, as far as I know, really my cousin, but any distinguished or prominent person with whom I agree named Oliver, I claim them in my family tree. But his most recent show was headlined Coronavirus Conspiracy Theories. And check out the show if you can tolerate Cousin John. I think he's pretty funny and usually spot on in a lot of his critiques. And below that, I take note of Carl Sagan's famous baloney detection kit, which is really just a rule guide of critical thought, how to use your reason circumspectly and correctly. And here's a video where Skeptic magazine publisher Michael Shermer discusses the baloney detection kit. And baloney is, of course, a euphemism for what Princeton philosopher Harry Frankfurt calls, and I've left a blank for you to fill in. Maybe you've had an opportunity to look at that already and filled it in, and you know that the answer is that Harry Frankfurt calls it bullshit. He wrote a famous little essay called On Bullshit that was later repackaged as a very tiny pocket-sized book. And bullshitting is not quite the same as lying. It's where you say things that may or may not be true. You could care less. You're indifferent to the truth. Baloney, bullshit, call it what you will. The point of using your critical intellect is to avoid being snookered and taken in by baloney or bullshit peddlers. And on that score, Kurt Anderson, whose book Fantasyland I have often referenced in my classes and used in my intro classes, has a new book, kind of a sequel to Fantasyland. Fantasyland is the world we live in which too many of us are indifferent to the truth. His new book is coming out in August. It's called Evil Geniuses, The Unmaking of America, A Recent History. I look forward to it and recommend it. Sight unseen, because Fantasyland was so good. A post called Denial, Disastrous, Then and Now, based on one of my tweets the other day. The relevance of the 1925 Scopes trial in 2020 is more evident every day. It's all about the horrific human toll of science denial, as we're seeing unfold with the pandemic spike and racist resurgence. It's about shredding, then beginning to restore in November, ? Our shared humanity. And Bill Nye, the science guy, illustrates what I'm saying about science denialism and how it leads to shoddy and sometimes unethical thinking and acting in a very quick 1 minute, a TikTok video, which maybe we can queue up if I'm quick about it here. Let me see. No, it's not going to be here. Might be here. Let me see if I've got it ready to go. If not, we'll move on. Actually, what I have, here it is. And then I've got something else to maybe show you. Haven't I? Where are you, Bill Nye? You know, I might have to toss in the towel on this and encourage you to check it out for yourself when you get the chance, because it's not loading correctly quite yet. Or maybe it's right here. Maybe it's right. I got it, I think. Let's see.
This is a map of the continents of the Earth showing how much ultraviolet light lands in each latitude.
Well, you can hear him. I don't know if you can.
The closer you are to the equator, the more intense the ultraviolet. We use reds and purples. But then as you move away from the equator, we change the colors to orange, yellow, greens, and grays. Now here's the same map of just one color. And
Well,
it turns out that
here's a freeze frame.
on Earth is descended from people that live here in Africa. And then as groups of us moved around the world, the color of our skin had to change. And here's why. Our skin is where we make vitamin D. If you don't get enough ultraviolet, you don't get enough vitamin D. But if you get too much ultraviolet, then you break down your folates. You have to have it in perfect balance. And because the ultraviolet varies, the color of our skin varies. And that's it, everybody. That's why we have different colored skin. But we're all one species. But we're not treating each other fairly. Not everybody's getting an even shake. So it's time to change things.
All right. Well said, Bill Nye, science guy. Now then, what else was I going to show? Well, because it is July the 20th, I thought we might take a look at a little clip. As I was saying, Inherit the Wind is not, it doesn't claim to be entirely factual. It's a Hollywood creation, but I do still think that it's true to the spirit of the exchange between Bryan and Darrow. And let's see if we can catch a bit of it.
And all these holy people got themselves begat through original sin? Well, all that sinning make them any less holy?
Your Honor, where is this leading us? What has it got to do with the State versus Bertram case?
Well, Drummond, the court must be satisfied that this line of questioning has some bearing on the case.
You've ruled out all of my witnesses. You must allow me to examine the one witness you've left to me in my own way.
Your Honor, I am willing to sit here and endure Mr. Drummond's sneering and his disrespect, for he is pleading a case of the prosecution by his contempt for all that is holy.
I object, I object, I object.
On what grounds? Is it possible that something is holy to the celebrated agnostic?
Yes. The individual human mind. In a child's power to master the multiplication table, there is more sanctity than in all your shouted amens and holy holies and hosannas. An idea is a greater monument than a cathedral. And the advance of man's knowledge is a greater miracle than all the sticks turned to snakes or the parting of the waters. But now,
All right.
are we to forego?
You should really check that out. The whole film. And then compare it against the real court transcript and draw your own, have the courage to use your own understanding. All right. You guys had some interesting posts up here this week. I wanted to say just a couple more words, and then I'll look forward to Zooming with you tomorrow evening. Earlier post, The Grandeur of Our Ascent. And I also have an audio version of this. Just click on Listen if you want to hear what I have to say here, or variation on what I have to say here. In our reading this week, we finally encounter soaring oratory and high drama in the courtroom, and then out on the lawn. In opening statements, Bryan was brilliant, Malone more so, Stewart stopped the show. But Stewart also said something that sounds a lot like the astonishing statement that Trump's press secretary just issued the other day, that we shouldn't let science, quote, stand in the way of reopening schools during a pandemic. Shut the door to science when science sets a canker on the soul of a child. Bill Nye had some choice words for that one, too. I say, let's not shut any doors that promise insight into where the cankers really came from and how we can remove them. And let's not open any doors prematurely if our best science warns that it's not worth the risk of renewed contagion, specifically the schoolhouse doors. Bryan's brief against evolution, in a nutshell, is this, I think. The Christian believes man came from above, but the evolutionist believes he must have come from below. That's fundamentally correct, though plenty of theological modernists we've seen in Larson's text affirmed and still affirm that we're from above and below, that you don't have to make that choice, that dichotomous either-or dilemma. But his statement freights below with a lot of baggage the evolutionist would leave behind. Lowly origins imply nothing dark, disgusting, or satanic. They simply bespeak the grandeur of our ascent, or descent if we're emphasizing genealogy rather than aspiration. And of course, again, the famous concluding lines from Darwin's great book: "There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers having originally been breathed into a few forms or into one, and that whilst this planet has gone cycling on according to the fixed law of gravity, from so simple a beginning, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been and are being evolved." And then I illustrate that with a couple of videos that you might want to check out. First, Richard Dawkins, reading those lines. And they're illustrated, first of all, with a school of dolphins and lots of other natural forms. And then another one, this is an auto-tuned video. If you don't like auto-tune, you can just skip it and scroll down the page to read the transcript. But it's one of the Symphony of Science videos. A musical celebration of the wonders of biology, including evolution, natural selection, DNA, and more, featuring Sir David Attenborough, Richard Dawkins, and Bill Nye, the science guy. I've got the lyrics here. We can scroll on down. And near the end, Sir Richard Attenborough: "Those animals may seem to us to be very remote, strange, even fantastic, but all of us alive today owe our very existence to them." Right? It's all a great interwoven, ecologically interconnected, evolved bundle of life, of which we are a part. All right, well, maybe that's the place to stop for now. Now, you know what? Let's stop with a line from the opening speech from Malone, right? Who said, among other things, that surprisingly earned raucous applause from the Dayton gallery. He said, "Let the children have their minds kept open. Close no doors to their knowledge. Shut no door from them. Make the distinction between theology and science. Let them have both. Let them both be taught. Let them both live." So, again, live and let live. Talk to you later.